Welcome everybody joining us live or viewing us via the recording. You've just joined the webinar with another 120 fabulous people. And this interdisciplinary panel this afternoon is generously hosted by the Mental Health Professional Network in partnership with Kids Matter Primary and Kids Matter Early Childhood. Before we get going, let's just check that you're completely comfortable and ready to engage with our expert panel this afternoon. With such a large group, 120 and increasing, text chat is going to be your main mode of communication this afternoon. So while I'm talking at the moment, I'd encourage you to drop a welcome into the text chat box at the bottom of the screen. Just let us know who you are, where you're from, and possibly what your role is. And you can do that anytime while I'm talking. You'll notice down at the bottom of the screen there's also a technical chat. And you can use that technical chat to engage with Gavin, who's available in the control room to support you with any technical issues that you may have. Thanks for that, Gavin. Let's just consider some ground rules this afternoon in a pleasant way to make sure that our experience is as positive as it can be. We need to just keep in mind that this is a public professional space and what we say can and may be used against us in a court of law. Only kidding. But if we could just keep in mind that both our expert panellists and our other participants can see everything that you text and type in there. We just ask that you're mindful of this, but we also encourage you to use the text chat as a place to think out loud, pose questions and to make sense. And we'll certainly be using your questions a little bit later on. Let me introduce you just quickly to our Brains Trust here this afternoon. You can see these gorgeous people gathered around my head here in Brady Bunch style. It is going to be a conversation around our featured case study of the Orlov family, which was emailed out to you with your registration paper. But let's just hear quickly a little bit from some of our guests. Our first one, Professor Donna Cross, who's just over there to, I think, my right or your left. She's based in Western Australia, where she is the Professor of Child and Adolescent Health at Edith Cowan University. A quick question for you, Professor Cross. What age range is your research most focused on?
Hi everyone, thanks Mark. We focus on school-age children from entry at about age 4 or 5 through to 17 years of age.
Great, thank you and welcome, and thank you for your time. Ms. Tracy Simpson is joining us from New South Wales, where she's both an early childhood consultant and a project officer for Kids Matter Early Childhood with their Aboriginal Torres Strait Islander initiative. Tracy, a question for you. What drives your commitment and your interest to community partnerships?
Oh, hi, Mark. Hello, everyone. It's great to be with you this afternoon. Community partnerships have shown me throughout all my work that you can have success in the hardest of contexts and have wonderful outcomes for kids, families, and for all parts of the community if you're willing to open up to community. So I'm very committed to relationships with the wider community and the communities within it.
Great. Thank you for that, Tracy, and welcome on board to our panel. We'll make sure you're all well looked after this afternoon. I'm Mark Sparble. I work for Principals Australia Institute based in Adelaide with the Professional Services team. I'm also a teacher and a principal. I've worked in the education sector for a quarter of a century. Mostly in regional and rural settings where I've been a leader and teacher. So this case study certainly resonates with me and I'm looking forward to what the Brains Trust bring to this. Now, a couple of things to make mention of. This event and any artefacts from this event in the form of the recordings, the text chat and the documents in the bottom right hand corner of the screen will all be available to you. I believe that you'll receive an email follow-up which will contain a copy of the slide stack. Plus, you should also have the artefacts already. If you haven't received the case study, then you will find that. Okay. And Louise, third person. So Dr. Louise Porter works in Brisbane, not Victoria, as you might have read elsewhere, where she's a clinical and child psychologist. She has extensive experience in social and emotional intervention support. A question for you, Louise, and welcome. Whereabouts is your workplace? Are you in schools or are you in a practice?
I'm mainly in a practice, although that's very part-time now. I'm retiring, as it were. Most of my time I spend either writing or presenting seminars for teachers, early childhood workers and parents.
Right, thanks for that, and good luck with the retirement, because I believe that that Tracy was attempting that, and it doesn't look, sound and feel as though there's been much rest in that retirement, but you never know. So thank you, Brains Trust. As I mentioned before, the artefacts for this will be available following up. This afternoon we're going to follow a case study approach around the Orlov family. The Orlov family are a family new to a particular setting who have children in both early childhood and also within primary schooling. What our panellists are going to do is bring to that story a discipline-specific perspective in a response to that family and that situation, and they'll only have 5 minutes each. So I'm going to ask our panellists to be very strict with their self-regulation with time, and I'll try to give you an indication by opening my mouth or waving my hands when that time is up. Following hearing from our panellists, we're then going to have some panel discussion around questions raised by you, the 126 participants, or from the questions that were previously submitted with registration. So the aim of this is really to have a conversation, to not come up with necessarily one specific answer or resolution to the challenges presented by the Orlov family, but to receive multiple perspectives and allow us to think around a range of responses and strategies in relation to mental health and well-being of these children and their family more broadly. After we've finished the conversation, we will have some closing comments towards the end of the webinar from our panellists, which we're looking forward to. So let's move on to the responses, which I'm looking forward to. I'm rubbing my hands to hear this. As a regional school leader, as I said, this certainly does resonate with me around challenging assumptions and looking at a strength-based approach. The first person to provide their response to the case study is going to be Donna Cross. So let's cross to Donna Cross. Thank you.
That's a pretty good line, Mark. Thanks for that. I would like to focus on the two children in particular in this case study, given that our research has spent most of its time focusing on early childhood and middle childhood in particular. And I have some slides, Mark. I'm just checking that they're able to go up as I'm speaking. I'm not sure if they are or they're not, but in any case, what I would like to focus on is a quote that I believe is quite important for social emotional learning in young people. And that's a quote that goes something along the lines of, you can't pull your socks up if you don't know what your socks are. And I think many times when children are having difficulties in school, particularly as it relates to social and emotional health, that we find that those children are often treated as a discipline problem. And I'm thinking of the little boy Victor, for example, that Victor's behaviour might be perceived as poor behaviour, and therefore the quality of support or social learning that goes with that behaviour can often be limited just to punishment or consequences. So I'd like to talk about the sorts of things that can be done to support children's social and emotional learning, and particularly around the sort of protective factors that are found to be most important in supporting young people. And you'll notice in the slide that you'll see in front of you is that many of these protective factors that are listed here are highly changeable. There are lots of things that we might like to do to support Victor and Sophia, for example, but not all of them are changeable. Now, of that list, you'll see things like social competence, optimism, good coping skills, decision-making skills, and so on. And all of these things are clearly actions that school staff could take to make a difference for the social and emotional learning of these children. And all of these things certainly have been identified, or each of these factors have been identified through research as factors that we can change and that we've been successful in doing through many social and emotional learning programs. On the next slide, I'll talk about relationships being hard, and I think often when teachers and even parents are in a relationship with their children, and I'm focusing again on Victor in this case study, it's important that we don't fall into a rut with these relationships and that we don't take action to try and support children in ways to behave better. And I'd like to draw on a strategy that is well used and well researched throughout Australia and internationally, and it's called the Good Times Bank. And it's about helping teachers and parents get out of the rut that they might be in terms of how they would respond to these poorer behaviours. I don't know if the slide's appearing in front of you now, but it should be headed, Why a Good Times Bank. And Good Times Bank, I'm sorry?
We can see the slide, thank you, Donna.
Oh, that's terrific. I'm sorry, I just wasn't sure if that was the case. So why the Good Times Bank, which I think is the next slide on from the one that you see there at the moment, is about helping to store goodwill with children, and why, what are some of the actions that teachers and parents can take to try and change the behaviours of children through an investment in the time that they spend with those children. And the Good Times Bank, if you were to do a Google search on it, it's a very simple strategy that is about kind of building credit, hence the name Good Times Bank. And as you can see on the slide that follows, it's about dealing with children who have difficulty with emotions and behaviour. And often when you're in a situation where children are displaying difficult behaviours, you can exhaust your store of goodwill with those children. And so this is about trying to bank up positive experiences. And this might be a strategy in this particular case study that the school or families or other people who interact with Victor in particular could put in place. When you look at why the Good Times Bank is useful, it's a really important way for adults who are interacting with children who are having difficulties to understand their strengths, their weaknesses and their interests, so that when that child is behaving badly, you can draw on that understanding and draw on that credit that has been established with that child to help them deal with that situation much more effectively as part of their overall social emotional learning. So there are a series of steps that an adult might typically take, and on the next slide you'll see that the adult role, and there's a really interesting acronym that's often used to talk through the sorts of actions that we should be doing when we're investing in this Good Times Bank. So assuming that I'm sitting with Victor and giving him some support, that I need to be listening more than I'm talking, that I need to follow the child's lead, I need to observe the child and understand what the child is telling me through that observation technique, narrate as much as possible what the child is doing, helping the child to label their emotions so that when they are experiencing difficulties, they have a literacy that they can draw on to talk about those later, and of course helping them to develop and communicate some ideas or messages. And on the next slide, what I've tried to do is just to summarise what some of those messages might be, thinking about this interaction that we're having. And you can see there's a table on the next slide that says, possible messages that you might provide to children are things like, I'm interested in you, I can be a helper, I'm consistent, I'll support you, and I'm safe. And as I've already described, there are clearly actions that we can be taking at the same time to develop this. So in supporting Victor and in supporting Sophia, based on empirical evidence in this area, the following slide talks about the sorts of things that we could be doing if Sophia is having difficulty with her loneliness and feeling, or at least seemingly isolated from other children, and similarly Victor, who has difficulties with his aggressive behaviours. The next slide shows the sorts of things that we should be doing to help. So we need to be listening as much as possible without interrupting. In one of our studies, which was called Keeping in Touch, we found that there were a series of 4 things that all adults should be trying to do with a child who might want to explain any difficulties that they're experiencing. This might be for Victor or Sophia. And we use something called the LATE model. And the LATE model encourages adults to listen, hence the first L. Just listen to what the children are saying, maybe not talk as much as we typically do. Acknowledge how they're feeling is the A section. So I'm just listening, I acknowledge, you say something like, that sounds pretty tough. Talk about options, and that doesn't mean us giving children options. It means helping children think of those options themselves and giving them ideas about how they might be able to respond in the situation that might be causing them difficulty. And last but not least, ending with encouragement. So giving children a sense that they can come back and talk to you about this issue again. And this research argues that when children present needing help in any area of their social and emotional development, that these actions will give them a sense of support and encouragement, and that the adult that they're interacting with, as a first parent or a teacher or somebody else, is giving them the impression that they are someone who can be trusted and someone who will help them in the situation that they're experiencing. The second last slide, I've nearly finished, I promise, Mark, is to talk about the most successful teaching techniques that we might use in supporting both Victor and Sophia in their various social and emotional learning needs. We talk about the proactive classroom management techniques that we should be doing, that obviously our emphasis is on prevention. To think about formal grouping. Poor Sophia is having difficulty making friends, so structuring the classroom to make sure that Sophia is mixing and having an opportunity to interact with other children will be important. A lot of cooperative learning group activities, focusing on supporting children to work together and to collaborate. It's a wonderful a game called Good Behaviour Game, which gives everybody in the group responsibility for keeping everyone included and supporting somebody like Sophia. Some clear rules that developed by the class to help everyone behave better. It might be a little bit difficult with Victor's group, as young as they are, but some ownership of rules around behaviour. Obviously lots of peer support for that behaviour change, and of course giving children as many opportunities as possible to learn how to develop friendship skills and know how to use those social skills in different situations to control their emotions and to learn how to engage in a very positive way. So my final thought on the last slide, as you can see, is that some students truly need help to maintain their self-control and to help them to integrate with other children, and it's really our job to set up some social architecture to create environments that allow children to express their emotions positively and get appropriate support when they're not doing that. And similarly, for children who are isolated and lonely, the ways that we can create environments that they feel supported in the case of Sophia in this story. Thanks, Mark.
Great. Thank you so much, Donna. It's a shame your video dropped out. We had people desperate to keep seeing you, I think. Let me just have a quick look there. No worries, we can work on that. That was fantastic for our first response to the Orlov family case, and there was a lot of information there, and people, make sure while you're listening, just use that text words that you're hearing. I picked up a lot there from the Good Times Bank, specific strategies for developing, if you like, that emotional bank account, the FONLD, sort of thoughtful actions that adults can undertake, and picked up a strong message of not necessarily leaping into an intervention, but seeking first to understand. There was a strong relational focus and active listening focus from what I heard just then. Tracy, do we have you lurking around there in cyberspace? Now, Tracy, as we found out in our introduction, has attempted retirement but has failed. She's an early childhood consultant based in New South Wales. And Tracy, we're interested to hear about your response to the case study of the Orlov family. Tracy.
Thanks, Mark. For those working in early childhood education and care services and schools, sometimes competing priorities and heavy workloads make us see the case study like the Orlovs as something that's a bit of a challenge rather than part of our everyday workload. And so it's hard to think that it is just part of everyday teaching and learning. And mental health doesn't come in a box all on its own either. It's actually part of a complex and whole picture. So the way that the connection between the family experiences and care and education experiences for the Orlovs comes together is only part of a bigger picture. So I encourage people to think of that really big picture that this is all playing out in. So I think a case study like this encourages us to unpack the story, all of the story, so that we can look at it through the eyes of other people, and then to notice how it looks different. For Victor, maybe it's, I'd prefer to be at home with you, Mum, or playing with Nan and Papa. I can't make them understand me here anyway, so why am I going? For Anton and Lena, it might be, they're all very nice, but do they understand how hard it is to move and all the emotional consequences that go with that? I hope they're doing the right thing by our kids in this new school. So I think that perspective is really important. But to bring those perspectives of knowing and being and feeling all together, it takes the task of organising authentic opportunities to include those perspectives. That might be to organise home visits if appropriate. Ask the question, how do you make one day Victor Day? Need a day. We need to take time to plan a considered case studies like this, take time to work on relationships, take time to plan, do, review, and allow time to work in bite-sized steps so we don't all burn out in some horrible way. I think we need to also remember that for every child and family that enters into a group, a class, a service, the dynamics change and the experience changes in some way. And what we tend to do is forget that it takes time to settle into this new culture of what the people who are new to the situation bring. So I also suggest taking a breath, figuring out that this is a new place and space. As educators in whatever context, our role is to initiate the new relationships. It's important that we work on the relationships as part of our core business in early childhood and school education. It's a great strength to our set of tools that we have. I also think that if we consider how Victor's relationship with his educators is going as part of our regular planning, we're actually part way to addressing some of the issues that they're seeing. Are people asking the questions about how they can connect better with Lena and Anton? Because that's part of planning. It's not just something that happens on the side. Are there opportunities for the best person to make contact with Lena when she comes to the preschool? You know, lots of short conversations are okay. You don't have to have the big conversation all the time. What about the fact that we can work together and involve Lena and the children's grandparents in sharing their language and culture? What a great resource. There's the thing that goes in that positive bag that we need to look at. In the end, the goal is to find a comfortable relationship so that working together for the children is possible. So parents want to trust that their children's educators are doing the right thing by them. They want to know that they're acting professionally, but they also want to share the power in achieving that. So everyone needs to be sure about what's really going on for the children and for the adults in the context. So in order to do that, as Donna mentioned about additional information, you actually have to have the very best observations, interpretations and actions for this child and this family. It's not something you can get from just another book. It's about shaping this for these people in this context now. While both these children are in different contexts, they're actually both in the early childhood age range, birth to 8, but we'd never suggest that they should both have the same response to their particular situation. Each of the educators need to make detailed observations and also find ways to have input from Lena and Anton. And even if that is difficult, we've got to keep knocking on the door, ringing on the phone, whatever it is, so that we do get that input and that they are part of that sharing. Often it's tempting to do the ABC, antecedent, behaviour and consequence. And yes, that does work for some aspects of behaviour, but it's not that simple. We need to know what's really going on. What's really going on for Victor in terms of his separation anxiety, his settling in, his emotions, his speech and language. What's really happening for Sophia, you know, is she gifted and needing different experiences? What is it that's really going on? We need to bring in the child's voice. So often we're in a hurry to fix the problem or the situation and forget how clever children are. We need to really listen to them and then reflect again and move on to actions that show that we are listening to them. I mentioned before, everyday work is about emotional and social wellbeing. So modelling, supporting and reassuring, storying, talking and practice are everyday teaching skills that we'd all say that we apply. In this case, these tools could be applied to modelling how you make friends, supporting and reassuring at separation time, stories about how you cope with your emotions, talking, taking time to speak slowly and listen, and giving the opportunity to practice. Encourage practicing making friends. Encourage practice about talking and being part of what's going on in this context. And then, with all that bubbling along, I think we've got creating a sense of community, developing children's social and emotional skills, and working with parents. We can also look at making some links. That can happen simultaneously, or it can fit once the relationship's been started. For example, in the case study, there's mention of the preschool and school having a great partnership. Here's a time to test it. What can they do together to welcome and embrace the family? What can they do together to support both children in their new endeavours in this community? Are there opportunities for planning, connecting to other adults? So you pick up time might be a sausage sizzle, and it only takes a moment. Afternoon and morning tea and ice blocks get people together. Whatever you do, you might look for expertise and services, but you don't make promises you can't keep, so you need to find those expertise first. And then, lastly, seek out resources for everyone. Not just you, not just the kids, but for everyone. Thanks, Mark.
Great. Wow. Thank you, Tracy. You've really understood what may be going in the heads of those kids and their families. I wrote down on my list of notes that you'd be a great TV clairvoyant like the mentalist. Your insights were quite remarkable. I was sort of compelled to sort of watch and listen to think, wow, you really do have got under the skin. You've unpacked their story extremely well, and I saw that pop up in the text chat. People were enjoying that. And I heard from you that it's the teacher's role to initiate new relationships. And I like the way you framed. I like strategies from the broad ones to the quite that can have short conversations, but come through loud and clear again. To be listening actively to the needs, if you like, of the students themselves and their families, and that sometimes that clinical response of an ABC response, it may have its place and be useful, but at other times that, I guess that's more understanding the complexity and again seeking to understand and build the relationships first as being fundamental, not ornamental to strengthening protective factors and minimising harm. We'll get back to you, Tracy, no doubt, with some more questions which are coming through the text chat for you afterwards. But let's cross over now to Dr. Louise Porter. Now, this will be interesting. Dr. Louise has been published widely with books including Children Are People Too. There's a surprise for me when I think of my own 22-year-old and 20-year-old. Young Children's Behaviour, I wish I'd had that one. Gifted Young Children, and Teacher-Parent Collaboration. She's also produced some parenting courses available on DVD, focusing on obviously parenting and giftedness. So, Dr. Louise Porter, welcome. We're dying to hear your response to the Orlov family. Over to you.
Okay, I would start with Sophia, because that way, if you win the parents' trust about meeting her needs, then they're going to be willing to listen to the teachers about the needs of Victor, who I would like to see visiting a speech pathologist fairly soon. But starting with Sophia, we need to keep in mind not only that this is early days and that homesickness can hit you like a truck, and therefore we have to give her some time to settle into her new environment, but also just recognise that a third of people are introverted, by which I mean that they have good social skills, but after a time of having a lot of people around them, they get weary and they need some time alone. This is in contrast with extroverts who get energised with lots of contact. Now, we don't need to worry about introverts. They tend to be less susceptible to pressure from their peers, and they tend to have a depth of friendship even if they don't have a breadth. So in adult life, we're the sort of people who prefer a dinner party to a gathering of 50 people and small groups. Now, of course, no one has more than one or two intimate friends at a time, and Sophia's only a couple of months away from having lost many friends she had at the previous school, so it takes a while to find new friends. Luckily, it's not the number of friendships that counts, but the quality. And so children who are introverted are just as happy with their few friends as extroverts are with their many more superficial friendships. Now, the other thing we know is that children choose friends at their developmental level. And if Sophia is gifted, which we don't yet know, but if she is, and there's no one available at her developmental level, then the pattern that we see is pretty common. That is, they gravitate to adults or they go off and play alone. And in her case, she's going off to the library to read on her own. Now, we often assume that these children lack social skills, when in fact they lack social skills. And therefore, what I'd like to see for Sophia is that we give her access at school to older children or children at the developmental level. That is, other gifted learners, presumably either gifted or at least advanced. So one of the things that can be really useful that the school can do is form activity clubs with vertical age structures to meet at lunchtime. Now, these clubs not only meet children's needs for activity and social inclusion, but are a powerful way to prevent school bullying. So the considerable amount of bullying is really just for the children's entertainment to liven things up a little, because they literally don't have enough to do at lunchtime besides gossip and pick on each other. And so one of the few of the examples that you see on your slides there are to have a group who's interested in gardening and they could grow some produce, but a junior chef group could use to sell at a local shop. And of course, in this case, she might belong to a book club. Others will be interested in a chess club, a computer club, woodwork, art group, and so on. Now, the beauty of these not only is the fact that the children will now have something to do at lunchtime that is non-academic, that fulfills their passion in life, but we can recruit parent volunteers to lead these groups. And these volunteer groups can form a support group of parents. And let's say that Sophia's mother is one of the people who's joining this group.
Louise, I'm sorry to interrupt you, but would you mind maybe just using your handset while you're talking at the moment?
Yes, can do.
A bit of difficulty with the speakerphone.
Okay, how's that? Is that better?
2 thumbs up.
Okay, good. All right, so back to recruiting parent volunteers to lead these groups, because teachers are already busy enough. We can perhaps invite Lena and Victor if he's available, and perhaps he probably won't be, but to lead a group about a multicultural group, or to be part of a multicultural group, or they may well have expertise in one of the areas in one of the clubs. And that way the volunteers can meet each week or as needed at the school, and the parents themselves can get some support from other parents. Other ways that we can get parents attending the school is to have community specialists and local agencies delivering their services on school grounds. So again, the parents become used to being on the school grounds for other than drop off and pick up, and they start to see the school as a base for some of their own activities. Community specialists could present monthly talks. The parents of young children, of course, are interested in issues such as children's behaviour and development. The parents of older children might be interested in issues such as the transition to high school. And as you see there, and I've already covered, community and cultural elders and leaders can present their cultural knowledge and stories, which of course in that net would include Lena with her understanding of Russia. Now, I believe that meeting the children's needs is the best way that teachers can win parents' respect. Talk's nice, but what parents actually want from the teachers is for them to teach their children superbly well. And with that in mind, I think that the teachers need to arrange for an IQ assessment for Sophia to see if she's gifted, and then on the basis of those results, develop an IEP that offers her advanced work, but more important than that actually, that offers her access to intellectual peers. Now, depending on her level of giftedness, this can be subject skipping for the subjects in which she's advanced, or if her giftedness is significant, it can even be necessary to do grade skipping. Now, teachers can provide academically for gifted learners within the classroom, but they can't provide for social peers because children choose friends at their developmental level, and that's why sometimes I advise grade skipping so that the children can access others who are at their developmental level and are therefore potential friends. Once these measures have earned the trust of the parents, I would then be asked if they would be willing for Victor to see a speech pathologist and audiologist, not on the grounds that they suspect there's anything wrong with Victor, but as a way of the teachers saying, we'd like some expert advice about how we can assist his language skills. So, of course, at this stage, it's inappropriate for the teachers to label him as having a language problem, but they can ask for some advice so that they can help his language skills. And once he has language to express himself, I'm sure you'll see the behaviours improved. As you now see on your screen some of the references that you might find useful. My main stance when it comes to collaborating with the parents is to recognise that parents employ us to teach their children. So the relationship really has to be parent-driven, not teacher-driven. They employ us to help them raise well-educated, well-balanced children. And so they're the ones who decide on the type of relationship they want to have with their teachers. But given that Lena, for example, was educated elsewhere, she may be unfamiliar with the local education system and with how she can develop a less hierarchical relationship with teachers than perhaps she might have been used to in her home country. We can show her that by working extremely successfully and effectively with her children and inviting her and all the other parents into the school on a regular basis rather than just as one-off to have conversations. I'm quite happy to leave it at that for now.
Great, thank you so much, Louise, and your audio was super clear coming through the handset, and I know that participants, or 142 of you, appreciated that, so that was excellent, thank you. Now, the couple of things that I noted here from your session, again, there was a strong sense of focusing on the capabilities, if you like, the assets, the value that the parents and the students already have from their cultural backgrounding, and also particular skills or capabilities they might have, and inviting those into the school in some very authentic and non-tokenistic ways. You talked about possibly arranging for IQ assessments of the daughter, and maybe even seeking advice from speech pathologist around, some strategies to develop the receptive and expressive, probably, I'm not sure whether it's receptive or expressive in this case study, language of the younger boy. Again, inviting came through strongly. I think one of the bits that I really liked about your review was recognising that the behaviours that we see may well be perfectly representational of an introverted child who just needs time to be comfortable and is actually engaging in a way that would be perfectly normal for an introverted child. So in a sense, you were challenging an assumption that people might make that there necessarily is an issue around that. Got a comment there from Pam saying, always love listening to Louise Porter and her ideas and strategies for working with children. So you've brought your own fan club here with you today. Thank you, Louise. Terrific. Thank you. People dropping questions and comments in the text chat box. Strategies from having play groups on school grounds, enrichment programs for gifted children, but with some provisos wrapped around those ideas as a source of expertise. So keep those strategies and ideas being generated in the text chat box. Friends, what we're going to do now is move into a question and answer session. So I have some questions that I've been jotting down post to our participants, and we might, Gavin, if you're around, if we're able to pop up all their video panels, that would be great. If not, just let me know through the panel chat. Here's the first question that I have for Donna and Tracy and Louise, and we'll bounce around and get a quick response from you in just a moment. But my question is to do with, if we've allowed time for the students, if we've recognised there may be some personality types in play here, that possibly there's even some cultural diversities, a cultural disconnect between the community the students and the family have moved into. So if we took into account those individual variances, when, though, should we start being concerned about the mental health and well-being of the children? What is it that we should be looking for, or the teachers should be looking for, and what should be their first steps? So let's say we've allowed a bit of time of settling in, we've engaged in some of the actions we've heard. When should we start to be thinking a little bit further? Louise, do you want to kick us off just for some early thoughts around that, and then we'll move on to Tracy?
I was thinking, I'll have to look up again, won't I?
Thank you.
Sorry. I would think the best time to be concerned is when the children seem sad or lonely. And therefore, this is why I was concerned initially with Sophia, that she would likely be feeling quite lonely, especially as she will have lost what friends she had in her previous school. So I think the indicator is really the children expressing some maladjustment, as I say, loneliness, sadness, or of course the behavioural signs or learning delays.
Okay, yeah, excellent. Thank you for that. I was just making a note to myself when you mentioned that about, reconnecting with the schools that they've come from. But thanks for those comments, those things for us to look out for. What about you, Tracy? What should we be concerned about in the longer term, and what should we be looking for and doing?
I think that we should keep an eye out for a disconnect from more and more activity, and as Louise says, that sadness, I think, is the one of the things that we need to keep an eye out for. Also, in the beginning, it might be just, I have a feeling there's something not right, but this child's behaviour still fits in what we might expect of a child, within a range of even 24 months around this child's age. It's something that we've seen before. When we start to get outside that range, as a professional, that's kind of pushed us as far as our knowledge goes. We should be looking for support from someone else to help us see what else might be going on there with either of those children, and that might be played out in disconnect in greater behaviours that are not appropriate, or in the quiet behaviours of withdrawal of Sophia. So I think it's when you get outside that scope and outside the scope of the professional.
Okay, that's a really good point you just touched on right at the end, outside the scope of the professional. We might come back to that one. Let's bounce back to Donna, who's here via paranormal means, but is certainly here. Donna, your responses around, when should we be concerned? What should we be looking for in the long run?
I think the points that Louise and Tracy have already raised have covered this well. But when you look at the two children separately, because I think when we're talking about them together, we have some quite different behaviours that each of those children are exhibiting. But let's look at Victor for a moment. As a 3-year-old, a child who's highly aggressive is likely to be not included in groups. Children of this age, a little bit older when he moves to 4 and 5 years of age, don't like people in their groups who disrupt the groups or make the groups not be as successful as they would normally be. And so often children like Victor wouldn't feel included in groups, and so teachers working with young people who are being marginalised because they don't fit with the more pro-socially behaved children need to be thinking about ways that these children can be re-engaged with these groups. This continual marginalisation, particularly if the children such as Victor, who's having language delays and difficulties in using perhaps communication skills to express how he's feeling about different situations, he's going to need quite a bit of help to integrate back into the groups and really support his learning. And I think, oftentimes we assume children know how to make friends and how to talk to each other, but we really need to show them in formal ways, in the same way that we might teach a basketball skill, how to shoot a basket. We need to show children how to break into groups. And if the children are playing outside and I want to join in, what are the actions that I need to take to do that? I can't come in, obviously, take the ball, change the rules, and then wonder why nobody wants to play with me. So with regard to Victor, I'd be most concerned about his marginalisation and how I could make sure that he was being reintegrated with the groups. With Sophia, I think Tracy and Louise have covered many of the issues. I'd be really worried for her continued withdrawal and retreating to the library, as is indicated in the story, and perhaps not mixing and integrating with the other children. And there, I think, the social architecture of perhaps the parents, and I know Lena doesn't speak English well, but if it were possible for her, with support from other parents, to organise play dates where perhaps Sophia could identify who would be some of the people that she might like to play with, and for Lena, with support and advice, setting up those opportunities for Sophia to start to build those relationships. And perhaps even at a school level, structurally there are things that the school could do. If Sophia's going to the library at lunchtime, sometimes the libraries leave their computers on. Of course, the worst thing for a lonely child to do is to connect with a computer, because then they're not learning any skills about mixing with other children. So putting out board games during a lunchtime breaks that maybe two lonely children who are in the library get to sit across from each other and are encouraged by the librarians to do so. And maybe that might help Sophia to learn how to connect with some of the other children in the school who also might be in need of a friend.
Good, excellent. Thank you for those comments. I particularly liked the part, Donna, there where you talked about the social architecture. In fact, preempting my next question, which I won't bother with asking now, which was around, what are those protective social architectures at a whole school level or at a classroom level, which might actually support these students. I just want to pick up on a little side comment that I saw drifting around within the text chat box, if you wouldn't mind just indulging me for a moment. It's come up in as one of the pre-asked questions, but it's also come up again in the text chat, and it fits in well with this case study. It's to do with tips, strategies to best deal with separation difficulties. The person states, often it seems that the parent is exacerbating what may initially have been a small problem. How should I approach the parent when often I've had little time to develop a rapport with them? And I think many teachers would encounter this. And I think there is a situation where it's normal, and then there's a situation where there seems to be some sort of codependency and problem. So I think if you could provide any advice just around separation difficulties, maybe as it relates to either of the children or in a general sense, and when to know that that's not within the bounds of normal responses and normal separation. I think people would be interested in that. So could we this time start with you, Tracy, just around tips on how to cope best with separation difficulties?
Yeah, I think we should go back to having conversations early with parents about what you're doing when you're supporting and helping children to settle into make that connect with the people in the service. And if you've had that conversation up front, it's easier later on to say, how we plan to do it this way. Well, I think now you need to back off a bit, and we'll work on the next strategy. How do you feel about that? So I mean, there are two parts of this. One is about the relationship with the parent, and the other one is about actually making that that step for the child easier. And I think the honesty with the parents from the beginning makes the difference with the parent relationship, and then being honest about what approach you think is going to work. For the child, I believe that if they get used to a pattern of how this is going to happen, they are supported through the emotions that they have as they separate, and they're supported as they make their way into their day in the children's service. That's how we get them to a point where they feel confident to do that on their own. But actually talking about it, not just with the parents, but with the child. No matter how young they are, they're very clever beings.
Thanks for that, Tracy. And I think you've also answered a couple of the other questions in that around how to approach these tricky conversations with families in ways that don't offend them and certainly don't then create a barrier for future engagement. So thanks for that. Louise, what about you in just a relation to those strategies you would suggest to do with separation difficulties or where it's become a real problem?
First of all, I'm not a great lover of attachment theory itself. The theory says that if children are properly attached to their parents, then they'll be able to form social relationships later. It turns out that if children are receiving responsive care from their parents, then they're more responsive to others. So it doesn't. So the quality of care they receive at the time is what's influential. Is all I'm saying. So first of all, I refer to it as separation distress, not separation anxiety, because I don't like to allude back to a theory that's not very helpful to us. Second, some children are very reliant on their parents to interpret them to the world and interpret the world to them. And these are children who are gifted and children with speech and language delays because they rely on their parents very much. Now that's aside from all the children who rely on their parents for other reasons. Or who think that mum's lonely and I need to stay home to look after mum, or whose mother has many children and they need to stay home to help mum with the other baby. So there's lots of reasons that children can be reluctant to separate. But separation involves two things. It means separating, which I've just covered, and also arriving. So we need to make sure that the centre is attractive, that there's the same children attending the same sessions to the extent we have control over that, so that a child can form relationships with at least one other child. So we don't know how often Victor's attending, whether he's coming once a week, which is long. Oh, sorry, I've forgotten about my sound again. Just a sec. If Victor's attending only once a week, then this is going to prolong his distress, whereas if he can come at least twice, and preferably on the same day as one other child who comes at least twice, then he can have a relationship that makes arriving at the centre, being there, more attractive than being at home. Well, not more attractive than being at home, but more attractive than it is if he's lonely. So in terms of separation, we have to take care of, could the child be not separating because the parent is needy or because the child is needy? And could the child not be separating because he doesn't like where he's being placed, because he hasn't formed friendships yet?
Excellent. Thank you, Louise. Again, your last couple of comments there, they make the teacher and we stop and think and reflect back over students who have, who have had issues with separation, and to actually wonder a little bit whether I could have thought through that a little bit more. Okay, we've got about a quarter of an hour left. Let's move to Donna now. And Donna, let's get your thoughts around that topic of separation. Let's call it separation distress.
Yes, well, I must tell you that I'm suffering a little bit from separation distress because I can't get back up onto the screen, so I do apologise for that. But with my voice in the distance, adding to what Louise and Tracy have already commented on, you think about transition generally at any age, and obviously particularly at the ages of Sophia and Victor, it can be a very traumatic period. So some of the structural changes that schools could consider, for example, are inviting the parents or family into the school. And I know in our case study that's been difficult but maybe inviting the parents in for successes, seeing some of the work that their children are engaged in, so that the parents are in the school more often, encouraging them to be involved in the school canteen, to join reading time, really be in the school, not obviously to interfere in any way, but just to be there so that they're in that environment. It would be very helpful. And similarly, if you think culturally, in many of the projects that we have that are working, for example, with Aboriginal children, many of the children and families talk about when they come into the school, they don't see anything that's Aboriginal, and they therefore don't find the environment warm and inviting. And given that this family has a strong Russian background, then perhaps there could be things that the school could do. They might have a day where the children are learning a few Russian words, perhaps study culturally. There might be a public holiday in Russia, something that can start to make the children feel like the school understands where they're at and can provide that support. The other area that schools structurally could support the children is their separation from their friends. And this is probably a bigger issue for Sophia than for Victor. The case study did say that Sophia didn't have many friends at her previous school, but she might have had one or two. So the sorts of things that could be done, perhaps just to help her still feel connected, to still have some friendship groups around her when her new friendship groups are forming. Social media obviously provides an opportunity for that, and I don't mean that as young as Sophia is, she should be on Facebook, but through some of the other social networking sites, Moshi Monsters, Club Penguin, those kinds of sites, children can maintain contact, or as we've always done, through letters and phone calls and so on, so that she still feels she has some structure and she's worthy and she has people who care about her, while at the same time building friendships in her new environment.
Thank you very much for that, Donna. That was an interesting point that you raised around possibly the role of technology in providing an environment to connect children back with their previous peers and contexts. So that's my phone buzzing. Or can it be looked at as being a distracting mechanism that maybe is going to deny children a chance to develop the social skills that they require? Now, we're getting lots of great stuff at the moment running through the text chat. I hope people are taking time to review that as it's rolling through. There's lots of strategies that people are talking about. One really good point is where schools have an open Edmodo or learner management system, parents are able to engage and find out what's happening in their child's classroom and school without physically having to cross the school gate boundary to enter the school to find out what is going on in order to support and understand their children a little bit better. Okay, let's just move into the homeward run here. What I'm going to do is ask each of our fabulous guest presenters to just respond to this. I'm interested to know. I've asked Louise, Tracy and Donna, I've asked them to actually come to my school because they're friends of mine, and I've asked them to come to my school and meet with the Orlov family and their teacher. I'm curious to know in that very first encounter what you might ask the teacher or what it is you might ask the children or their family. So you've come to my school, we've gone to the staff room, the family and the teacher and the kids are there, we're just having a bit of a catch-up, and I've introduced Tracy, a friend of mine and a colleague, I've introduced Louise. I'm just interested to know how you would engage with the family and the teacher to help us lead a conversation with the family and the children, which is going to better support their social and emotional health. So, let's place the fabulous Louise on the hot seat. Welcome to my staff room, Louise. The Orlov family, their teacher, Mr. Wilson. Louise.
Okay, the main thing I'd do is I'd ask questions. I'd ask them what their experience has been like moving to the town. Have they found some issues and so on? Is it different from what they expected? Very briefly, sort of just joining with them. And then in what way can I be of use to them with respect to their children's education. And then I just keep following up with questions about in what way can I be of help, what have other teachers been able to do that worked for them in the past, what's their biggest priority at the moment, because I can't assume that just because something's my priority or the school's priority that actually is the big burning issue for the parents. For all we know, it could be that their big issue is that they need Sophia, for example, teed up with some extracurricular activities. We don't know unless we ask. So my stance is one of curiosity rather than the expert who knows all. And again, the conversation would then just flow from what it was they'd found worked in the past, what they've done that works for themselves, what others have done in previous schools, rather than necessarily following my agenda.
Right. Thank you very much for that, Louise. What about you, Tracy? Welcome to my staff room, Orlov family and Mr. Wilson.
Well, Mark, I think I'm going to cost you more than one cup of tea. That's probably the problem here. Like Louise, I would take the notion of having a yarn with the family about their experience, you know, how they've come to be in this place and what their experience has been. As I said before, I think filling the gaps in the story and adding on to the story is really important. And most of all, I would listen to what they're saying and listen really carefully so that there will be times where I can say, oh, so this is how you see it. Is there something I can do to help you with this, or is there something the school should be able to do to help you with that? Or, wow, you know, you guys have got a great story. How can we share that more with the other people who are connected with your children? You never know what you're going to get out of a really good conversation with family, and you should leave it open for what it is on that day and then follow up from there. And it might take a bit longer than one cup of tea.
Thanks for that, Tracy. What about you, Donna? Welcome to my staff room and this new family and the teacher.
Mark, I think in addition to the comments that we've already had, one of the challenges we find with parents who are a bit disconnected with the school, apart from wanting them to come to the school and be in the staff room and chat, the school itself can be quite intimidating. So I might suggest to you that rather than meeting the parents at the school, if we were able to meet them at their home or meet them at a neutral place where we could talk to them. Because it may be that the school itself is intimidating, that perhaps the parents haven't had positive experiences with the school, perhaps there are places at the school that remind them of something that might be of concern to them. So I wouldn't necessarily want to just meet with them at the school. But if you did invite me and I had the opportunity to talk with them, I'd also like to talk to them about their perceptions of the things that are working well for them, and so that we can start to see those their perception of perhaps re-engaging with the grandparents, which seem like the main reason that they moved back to the country area, things that are working well for their family in the home that they're in at the moment, the things that are working well in the classroom, the things that are working well with their interaction with the teachers, to get an understanding of the sorts of things that they perceive are going well. And then looking at the opportunities. So where do they see the opportunities to help and support their children, and really getting their insight and an understanding of the issues that are good for them, but also within those discussions would come out, I expect, the things that are not working quite so well. But trying to keep the focus on the things that are working well, while at the same time also trying to more deeply understand what the issues are that they would like to see addressed.
Right. Thank you for that, Donna, Tracy and Louise, for your thoughts around that one. We're getting close to the wrap-up time. So just a couple of comments from me, so please bear with us for a few more minutes. It's a complicated story, but clearly the lived experiences of the family and the children are more than the manifestation of the symptoms that we see. I must say, for me this afternoon, working with three such esteemed people who understand the inner workings of the human mind has been a thoroughly terrifying experience. The Orlov family have faced both social, cultural and physical transition from one context to another, and we know that context matters. There's also this issue of appropriate developmental stages which has come into play through the conversations. I'm getting this sense that the Orlov family can manage the right way, can add value, and I really like that strength-based approach that was coming through, and that understanding that diversity is the new norm in our schools, both in cultural and academic and cognitive and social senses. And that, I guess my takeaway message is that the development of authentic positive relationships is fundamental to enhancing mental health and well-being for students, families and communities, and not ornamental. So it's a fundamental activity, as we've heard tonight, of people engaged in leading learning with young children, and that's come through loud and clearly. Could I say thank you to our participants who have been really active in the text chat, and I know that Donna, Louise and Tracy will enjoy scrolling through and reading those comments post-session. Could I particularly and formally thank you, Louise, thank you, Tracy, and thank you, Donna, for sharing your insights and your wisdom. I know we've only scratched the surface with your expertise, but just a quick thank you. And Louise, thank you.
Yeah, thanks very much, everyone.
Great, and thank you, Tracy.
Thanks, Mark, and thanks everyone for joining in.
Terrific, and thank you, Donna, on the phone there.
Thank you, and I am sorry that I dropped out visually.
No, that's okay, not a problem. People that are in the room, our 128 plus people, could you make sure you complete the exit survey when you log out? It will open up and it will also prompt us to make sure that we send you a certificate of attendance. You'll also notice on the slide that you'll be getting some information emailed out to you with any of those assets. You can keep in touch with more strategies to do with whole school approaches to mental health and wellbeing for young learners through the Kids Matter website, and you can also track down additional information through Facebook or follow them on Twitter. If you'd like to become a Kids Matter school, visit the website just up a moment ago and just follow the links. It's free and it makes a difference. Good. In that case, what I'd like to do is just to formally wrap up, to thank our organisers for hosting this event this afternoon. Thank again our fabulous panel for enduring their Q&A with me, Mark Sparvel, at Principals Australia Institute. And to formally say that class dismissed. Thank you for attendance and we'll see you at our next webinar. Thank you, everyone.
Yeah.